Everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Mark Vinitzky, and I'm one of the vice chairs of the AFHU Western Region Board. This morning, we will be in conversation with some very special guests. The Hebrew University's Vice President for University Advancement and External Relations, Ambassador Yossi, the Chairman of the Board of the Harry S. Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace, Dan Meridor, and its Academic Director, Professor Vinitzky-Seroussi. The topic of today's discussion is changes in the Middle East, challenges and opportunities for Israel. I now have a couple of more general announcements. The Hebrew University recently announced that it has begun construction on a biosafety level 3 lab. This lab will be at the center of the university's research to find a cure for the coronavirus. Some of the over 65 coronavirus research projects taking place at the university today will commence testing on the live virus in this new biosafety lab. Also, experts such as Professor Simon Benita are working to refine the way our bodies absorb new drugs to help treat illnesses faster, technology that can help COVID patients, and many more. I invite you to join us on Wednesday, November 11 at noon Pacific time for a webinar to meet Professor Benita and to learn about his fascinating work. If you are interested in hearing more about the amazing work being done at the Hebrew University, I invite you to join us at the 83rd Board of Governors on October 25 and 26. This year you can attend without buying a plane ticket to Israel because it will be the first ever virtual Board of Governors. To register or get more information about this exciting event, please email bog@afhu.org. And now to introduce this morning's featured speakers, I'm proud to present a longtime supporter of AFHU and a great champion of the Hebrew University, senior partner and chair of the litigation department at the law firm of Glazer Weil, and my fellow vice chair of the Western Region, Patty Glazer.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Well, good morning, good evening. Thank you. It's my pleasure to present the speakers today. They all continued the magnificent tradition at Hebrew University. It's not just ivory tower intellectuals, but wonderfully bright people with real world practical experience. Those of us who are supporters look with such pride at their accomplishments, which shines a favorable light on all Jews. Let's start with Yossi. Yossi Gal is a former ambassador to just about every country I can imagine. He is he's participated in peace negotiations with Israel's neighbors. He served in the Prime Minister's office as the Deputy General for Economic Affairs, and he ultimately served as the Director General of Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He participated in the Madrid Peace Conference. He's a member of the peace negotiating team with Jordan and the Palestinians and led the negotiations upgrading relations with the European Union. And just as importantly, Yossi Gal is a proud alumnus of Hebrew University. In conversation with Ambassador Gal this morning will be Dan Meridor. Dan is the chairman of the board of the Harry S. Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace at the Hebrew University. A Jerusalem native, Dan fought as a tank commander in the Six-Day War and in the Yom Kippur War. After studying at Hebrew University's Faculty of Law, he practiced law, something I do, but I have not had the accomplishments since practicing law that he has certainly had. He was elected to the Knesset in 1984. He held positions as Minister of Justice, Minister of Finance, and later served as the chair of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. He held the post of Israel's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Intelligence. In 2014, he became president of the Israeli Council on Foreign Relations. To moderate our very esteemed speakers, I'd like to introduce Professor Vinitzky-Seroussi, the academic director of the Harry S. Truman Research Institute at Hebrew University. Her research revolves around issues of collective memory and commemoration, and specifically the ways in which societies cope with their difficult pasts and histories. Professor Vinitzky-Seroussi was the first woman to serve as a dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences and currently serves as a member of the board of directors of the Israeli Democracy Institute. Thank you all for joining us. I want to just mention one more thing. Ambassador Gall accompanied a group of us to the Netherlands as a former ambassador to the Netherlands a couple years ago, and made an otherwise delightful trip much more meaningful with meeting the right people, going to the right places. He enlightened us, and he was just a beyond pleasure for all of us. So welcome all three of you, and please proceed.
Hi, hello. We're going to wait one more second for Dan to join us. Hi, hello. Good evening to everybody in the West Coast. And good morning to our friends at the West Coast, and good evening to my colleagues in our homes in Israel. Before I'm going to open the floor to my esteemed colleagues and friends, and I cannot wait to hear what they have to tell us tonight, I want to spend a few minutes and tell you a little bit about the Truman Institute at the Hebrew University. I don't know, but many of you probably know that it was founded in 1966 by American Friends of Hebrew University. It was the first in the region, and now the only one in Israel, to conduct within a university both research and public activity regarding peace and conflict resolution. Basically, when we're thinking about it, the Truman Institute sort of combined or rests on two poles. One of them is the more academic, and of course here we're searching, like the rest of Hebrew University, for cutting edge research. And within that, we inaugurated the first and only PhD program in Israel dedicated to peace studies and conflict resolution. And by now, we already have 12 young people staying with us and working on their topics. And on the other pole, we have a more public pole where the Institute tries to provide and encourage platform to enhance peace talks and tossing new ideas on peace and conflict resolution. Between those poles, we are actually thinking about constructing bridges to connect academics and practitioners to sort of provide data-based leadership. And one example, really one of our ample examples, one example for the kind of projects the Truman Institute is working on is the atlas, a new atlas that we will publish in 2 months, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about it, and it's really, really exciting, and I'm sure all of you would like to have a copy on your desks at home. It's going to be the Truman Atlas of Jewish-Arab conflict, and within that atlas, you can follow the conflict in the Middle East by looking into 36 maps narrating the story starting from 1915, and an exchange of very interesting letters between Hussein and McMahon, and of course completing with the Trump peace proposal titled The Deal of the Century. I'm gonna, a minute before I'm gonna turn the floor to my colleagues, I wanna invite all of you to join a special webinar conducted and led by our graduate students to take place 2 days from today. So I hope you still have some strength for yet another webinar. It's going to be on your morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. New York time, 8 p.m. Israel time. We're going to discuss the American elections and their impact on the Middle East and on our conflict. So please join us and hear some first-rate journalists, academics, politicians, both Israelis and Americans. I'm going to stop at this point and enable my colleagues to take the floor and to talk and give a short presentation about the challenges, opportunities of the region in light of the recent normalization agreements that were signed in Washington. I will first turn to Yossi and then to Dan, and then we are going to collect questions from you. So please send them through the chat and we're going to collect and ask. Thank you very much. Yossi, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Vered, my dear Patty, my dear Mark, and friends of the Hebrew University. I am indeed very happy to be with you this morning in Los Angeles, evening here in Jerusalem. But I'm even more honored to share the platform with Dan Meridor, because Dan is not only the former Minister of Everything, Justice, Finance, Intelligence, Deputy Prime Minister, and so on, but above all, he's my mentor and my close friend and the type of politicians that I yearn for. And also with Vered Vinitzky, who is a close friend from our joint days at the Foreign Ministry. Vered, of course, is much younger than I am, but we even spent some time together at the Foreign Ministry. To my friends in Los Angeles, I want to say before I start that I know that because of this plague, the Corona plague, we had to postpone our trip to Morocco. We were supposed to be in Morocco today, but I promise you that I have not given up on my dream to take you all to Morocco, hopefully at some time, some stage next year. And now to the subject matter at hand. Looking at the map of our corner of the world, one can easily identify the multitude of conflicts, of struggles, of tensions, and what have you that we endure in this part of the world. And of this almost endless menu, I want, with your permission, to point out to what I consider the two most important challenges at this moment in time. However, I want to look first at two recent developments that offer some new opportunities. The new agreements signed with the Emirates and with Bahrain, and also the situation in Lebanon, including the announcement, the recent announcement on maritime negotiations between Israel and Lebanon. And then I want to take a deeper look into what I consider to be much more meaningful challenges. Iran extending its reach to encircle Israel, and the Palestinian question that is being every now and then shoved away, refusing, of course, to disappear. But let's first talk about the opportunities in the news. The establishment of relations with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And in fact, as we speak, an Israeli delegation is in Manama. Many of my friends are there in order to conclude a series of agreements with the government of Bahrain. What is the importance of this development? I think it's mostly the fact that more elements in the Arab world are coming to terms with the legitimacy and the existence of Israel. People of my generation can certainly appreciate the gradual recognition. It started with Egypt, and then it was Jordan, and then certain countries in North Africa, and now the Gulf states. These agreements also present some economic opportunities for Israel, but as much as I think this is an important development, I suggest we don't get carried away, because I myself, in my previous capacities as ambassador and the head of the Foreign Service, I have visited most of these countries many times in the past. The wish to have an open relationship with Israel has always been there. And as a result, I think that the real test of this development will be if and when this step will serve to, I hate to use the word push, but to help the Palestinians understand that they should come to the table. If this pushes the Palestinians to re-engage and to understand that time is of the essence, and if this revives the concept of a regional peace with all of our neighbors, then it is definitely a significant development. The second point I want to touch on very briefly is this volatile situation with our neighbors to the north, Lebanon. Everybody knows that Lebanon is going through some very serious difficulties, but I, for one, do see as very meaningful the US mediation leading to the negotiations on maritime borders between Israel and Lebanon. And this is not something to be taken lightly. First, because it means economic opportunities for Lebanon in its impossible economic situation. And by definition, this is at least my experience, economic opportunities bring more stability to societies and to the region. But there's also another aspect of it, and that is it shows that Hezbollah is not running the show 100% in Lebanon. Otherwise, they would not have had the courage to come and engage us. However, these developments, in my opinion, pale in comparison with the two major challenges that we are facing in both our immediate and our outer circle. Whenever I talk about the Middle East, I talk about the inner circle, things that are happening within Israel. Well, and of course, this is a different story, and we're not talking about it, even though I think that what is happening in the inner circle are the most important issues. And then we have the immediate circle, these are the Palestinians, and we have the outer circle, these are the Iranians. So let me say on Iran a number of things. Iran continues to be the main threat to the stability of our region. They have for quite some time been on the verge of reaching the capacity of producing a bomb. They are heavily involved in Syria, and we do hear a lot about open clashes with Israel on Syrian territory. They are behind Hezbollah in Lebanon. They are behind Hamas in Gaza, and their involvement in terror inside and outside of the region is well known. And when you look at the map, it is easy to understand the encirclement extending from Iran to Iraq, to Syria, to Lebanon. This crescent has always been a dream of the Iranians and a threat to Israel. Last but not least, and in my opinion, very, very important, this is the Palestinian issue. And here, my point of view is very simple. Israel wants to continue to be a fully democratic country, and Israel needs to be and wants to be a Jewish state. Jewish not in the sense of being a theocracy, no, in the sense of being a refuge for Jews who so wish. And I remember from my days in Paris as the ambassador, the very fact that, Jews there knew that there is a country that will take them without asking anything, without asking about their health or their wealth, was of top importance. And in order to keep these two values of top importance, democratic and Jewish, I think that we have to separate. Now, I'm not naive. I know that the conditions are not ripe. I know that time is not ripe for negotiations, but I think that it is our interest to keep the options for the future alive. Because I strongly believe that it is in our interest to find a reasonable solution that will not compromise one iota on either our Jewish heritage or our ironclad commitment to democracy and its values. And the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, and I've had a number of years of negotiating with Palestinians and with the Jordanians, is that we should keep the option alive so that when time comes, we can get back to the table. And this is what negotiations are all about. I mean, you're not expected to peace is about compromise, and peace is about not fulfilling all of your dreams, and it's true for both sides. So this is, I think, where I should stop and give the floor to my better colleague, to Dan.
Well, good evening from Jerusalem. Good morning in California. You've heard every sensible thing about the Middle East from Yossi, so there's very little I can add, but I'll try to give some other thoughts in the same direction. You see, we live in an era of very drastic and dramatic and quick changes. I don't think in human history you had such an accelerated pace of paradigm changes, starting with technology. 30 years ago, had we talked to each other, there wouldn't be a computer, not only Zoom. The word Google didn't exist. The world was very different. It changes rapidly. The economy is changing, culture is changing, defense policies. In time of such dramatic and quick change, it is of utmost importance to try to understand in time the changes that may occur and adapt yourself. It's not easy, because I think that we need to have a long-range thinking or long-range view, and long-range with quick changes is some complex story. See, this is what I want to do now, and in the short time that I have, try to give a long-range view from the rapid changes that we see now. The uniqueness of our conflict is that Israel was seen as illegitimate by all its neighbors from day one. And there was a very vast asymmetry in terms of land, geography, number of people, wealth, between us and all our enemies. And the nightmare of Israeli military people was, what if all Arabs, thousands of tanks, roam from the east, from the west? How can we defend ourselves, such a small and tiny country? Now, fast forward, where are we today? This nightmare is over. Look around. Egypt, the most powerful and threatening country in the Arab world, is at peace with us for over 40 years now, since Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat, who were real leaders, not Poles leaders like today, but real leaders who took a decision and changed the Middle East altogether. So Egypt is not fighting us. For 40 years, no Egyptian or Israeli died in any battlefield. Jordan, that was taken out of the circle of war by Rabin and King Hussein in '94, with the longest border with Israel, it's not fighting us. In fact, it's an intimate partner in many ways. Syria was very able in killing its own force by killing its own people. They're not a real threat now. Lebanon has never been a threat. So what the threat has changed. And in fact, in a very positive way. If you look around us, what are the challenges? The challenges are not the conventional warfare to kick the Jews to the sea. It's over in the foreseeable future. It's a big story. It does not stem from them understanding that we are right and they are wrong. Unfortunately, it's realpolitik. They understand that we are strong. It all started in '67 with a dramatic change. They couldn't get rid of us, so if you can't beat them, join them. We see this along those years, and you saw Egypt and Jordan talked with Syria in Madrid, where Yossi just was mentioned as participating. And then you saw Morocco and Gulf states and whatnot. And now recently we see the two Gulf states with whom we're having a formalization of the normalization that we had with them anyway. So it's a very positive trend. And one needs to see it. It's not only the bad news of tonight, the threats, is basically positive trend. Where are the challenges? In fact, I think there are two challenges. Iran is one. I'll say some words about it. And I would say the most difficult one and threatening one is not a military challenge. It's the Palestinian story. I'll come to it in a minute. Iran is what? First, the nuclear story. You know it. And Israel had a policy for many years against a possible enemy with nuclear power. Three legs have this, we have for this policy, three parts. One part, which is very unique, prevention. We try to prevent an enemy country from having military nuclear power. You remember the Iraq nuclear reactor. It was taken down by our Air Force in '81. Then the Americans and the British took it again in Desert Storm. You may not remember, but Libya was on the way to get nuclear weapons with nuclear reactor with the Pakistani scientists. And then there was Syria, who tried to do that. The Americans, the British took Gaddafi out of its nuclear program. Syria was taken out by the Israeli Air Force. And Iran is trying to get nuclear. And if Iran gets nuclear, we all hear Saudi will get nuclear. It's very dangerous to have a nuclear Middle East. The first thing is prevention. I'll say something about it. The second is defense. We have built a very good defense system, the Arrow system. It's supposed to intercept incoming missiles. A lot of investment is put into it, a lot of thinking. And the third, on which I can, or I'm not allowed to say much, is deterrence. They know that if they mess around with us, they're going to be hit on the head. So basically we are, I would say, on a good track here. Iran was dealt with quite ably, and I say something that will not be shared by the government today. I think the Obama administration, with Europeans, with some Russian help in the beginning, did a relatively not bad job in the agreement they signed with Iran. It could be better. I myself had the discussion with Hillary Clinton, with others, but altogether, they gathered the whole world. There was a coalition of the whole world more against Iran, and they did a relatively good job. I don't know what will happen now when the agreement was, I would say, walked away from by the Americans, but Iran is not now there. We have to keep on having good intelligence and deterring, but it's working. On the issue of the existence of Israel, Iran brought back to the table the idea of Israel will not exist. We didn't hear it from any Arab country since '67. They reintroduced the illegitimacy of Israel. So this is a fight we have to fight with the Iranians. I think, I don't know what will happen in the next election in 2 weeks sometime in America, but I hope there will be a common language that can be developed between us and the Americans and others to contain Iran and see that this threat is not too threatening. I think we can do it. We've done it so far. At the same time, the opportunities of bonding more Arab countries, the Sunni countries, to us is evidently a very good development. It's not as dramatic as the Egypt-Israel peace treaty or Jordan-Israel or even Oslo at the time, but it's good. It's more legitimacy. We become a neighbor. It's not anymore a conflict of Israel existence. Will we exist or not? It may be a conflict on borders, on other issues, and you can talk. And this is, I think, of great importance. What is the major challenge, I think, to us? It's the Palestinian story for the following reasons. You know, I'm not a supporter of this government, and I say it openly. Because of this, I'm talking not to you and not sitting in the government, because I don't support them and I'm not there. But I have to say the truth. The truth is that we had several prime ministers on the very dovish side who tried very hard to get an agreement and couldn't get it. I was with Prime Minister Barak, with President Clinton at Camp David for 2 weeks in the year 2000. Barak offered everything, and there was a negative response by Arafat. Olmert in 2008 offered everything and more, and there was no positive response from Abu Mazen. Sharon gave away Gaza without anything in return. It became a launching pad for rockets and Iranian involvement. So we tried. It's not that only Netanyahu's policy, to which I don't agree, is the reason. It was very difficult. So they're not a security threat. So who cares? I'll tell you what's worrying to me. We are not in a status quo. We are on a movement, on a trend. That if we don't do anything and there is no agreement, in the end, if we continue settlement activity and there's no clear line, what is for us, what is for them, we may end up with one state, in fact, from the Jordan River to the sea. If it becomes democratic, it's not going to be Jewish. If they don't give them a right to be citizens and vote, it's not going to be democracy. So there's a big problem. What do you do with it? The leadership there is not ready. Think of Hamas fighting Fatah, Abu Mazen, and the Gaza people. I would say that if you can't get an agreement, which is probably the situation now, not only because of our government position, because of theirs, there may be a reason to do things unilaterally, which will not endanger the risk of the security of Israel. We can't take the army out. We did it in Gaza, it all collapsed. But we can say, and I would have said, this is the border that we want. It's what we call the blocks. It's 5-6% of land that is the blocks where most settlers live, 80% or more. The rest is for you guys. You don't take it. We'll keep the army there, but we don't settle there anymore. We don't invest anymore there. We only keep the army to make sure that we are defended. And if you come and talk with us, we'll talk with you. As long as you don't do that, we transfer every authority but the military to you guys. You do it. In fact, I want to leave open the two-state solution and close the door on the one-state solution, which is happening. What is happening is more and more, you can't see where the border was and people move as if it's one country, but the Arabs don't vote. This is danger for the very value and the justice of the cause of the Zionist idea. And this is something that we need to do something about. I'm afraid the government doesn't do much about it now. It will take a new government who will be ready to take a leadership decision and do it. Then maybe, and I hope it will happen, the Palestinians will understand that it's not good for them to wait. Because now they may think, all right, we don't do a thing. In one day, we'll get up in the morning and say, we don't want a state. We want to vote. What will he say to them? Only Jews vote in Hebron, not Arabs. So it's something, it's a part of the game where time does not play for us. If that's the case, we need to do something about it. I think we can, by delineating a line and acting the way I propose. So put it in summing it up, basically defense-wise, Israel's posture is much better than ever in the past. In terms of strength, the Arab world is collapsing. You saw the Arab Spring, the fighting with Iran. We can make good on some of these developments, like the fear from Iran, the absence of America that goes away from the Middle East and leaves it to others. So Israel becomes a good partner for many Arabs. We should make everything we can to bond more and to have better relationship. I think we can do it. We do part of it, may be able to do more. On Iran, we have to be vigilant and continue what we have done on our own and with the Americans and Europeans. And the Palestinian issue, I think we need to take initiative. It's not popular, it's not simple because you can't get peace tomorrow morning, but to change the course on which we are sliding now into a one-state situation is something that is very much in our hands. This is what I will say is the challenge. These are the opportunities, and I'd love to hear from you where I was wrong and why.
Okay, thank you very much for those opening statements. First question, I want to take you to Iran, and then the second question is going to take us to the issue with the Palestinians. The first question regarding Iran has to do with what does it take for Iran to become not an ally, not a friend, but similar to the kind of relationship that Israel has with Egypt. And to be more specific, maybe I'll use my biography. When I grew up in Israel and I was born in Israel, Egypt was perceived as the worst enemy ever. You know, we were really scared by the Egyptians. And then Sadat came, a peace agreement has been signed, and Egypt is now, you know, maybe they are not our close friends, maybe we don't spend the weekends, but still, we don't really count. What does it take for Iran to go through the same process? Assuming that, you know, we've seen other tough situations that ended up being not so tough.
I'll let Dan go first.
Let me, after I said and I agreed with Yossi that Iran is a major challenge, I would offer an idea that may sound strange. I start with that. Iran is a historic nation, 4,000 years of culture. They were part of the West. They went through secularization. A friend of mine, a professor at the Tel Aviv University, said once, in the Middle East, which is predominantly Arab, there are three strong, important countries: Iran, Turkey, and Israel. None of them is Arab. Why is that? Because they all went through secularization and they all went with the West and they were very advanced. What happened to Iran, you all know, in 79, and night fell on Iran. And what they have now is a tragedy for them and for the world around them. And I think with Iran, you can't be just nice and say, hey, be good to me, you were our friends, why don't you? I think we need to be tough with them because they play tough. But does this mean that there is no way that we can find areas of common interest and understandings? I think if I were the government today, alongside standing up to them and fighting them if need be, and that's the case now, I would send people to find out whether there's a way to agree. Maybe not on everything. For example, can we agree what will be done in Lebanon, that we won't cross a certain line that is bad for us and them? They want to go to Syria. Now we tell them no. If they come to talk with us, we may say yes, provided that you don't cross a line, you don't enter with certain weapons. I say it because Iran is going to stay here. It's a strong country. It was not hit badly by the Arab Spring. They are the Shiites, they are the minority in their world. They know all the story. They are an advanced country. They are smart people, generally speaking. And I think that in the Middle East, if you look for columns of stability, Israel is one, and Iran can be another one if you talk with them from a strong position, not from weakness. So I think that there is a reason to search for, try to find if there is a way to get to understand, to cooperate with Iran secretly, to try to mellow down the differences. It's not sure it will work, but I think it's important to do it. Will something happen within Iran? Will the government change in Iran? You know, when the Soviet Revolution took place in 1917 in Russia, and they won, the Bolsheviks, everybody said it won't last because it's against human nature. And they were right. Only it took about 70 years to collapse. So Iran, they say it can't last. I don't know. The bad guys do win sometimes, at least for a certain period of time. So I don't know. If they collapse, I would not sit shiva for them. Let them change. It's better for them, better for us. But alongside being tough with them, cooperating with others in the region, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the others, and the Americans, and the British, and the others, I would like to see if there is a way to get some understanding, some red line between us and Iran.
Thank you, Dan. Yossi.
Well, I would only add that Dan touched on the tragedy that engulfed Iran in 1979 and the very close relationship between Israel and Iran prior to that date. And there's no question that the Iranians are very smart people, but I strongly believe that whatever message comes from the Western world towards Iran, it should come from a point of strength and non-toleration. Not the message should be very strong, very tough, and not tolerating everything that we are witnessing. And the challenge of the international community is to continue to contain Iran so that it doesn't take further steps.
I just want to add one thing, Vered. People are much younger than me here all around, but some may remember the Iran-Contras affair, Oliver North. You remember these names? It was under Mr. Khomeini, an extremist, chauvinist, mullah, hatred of Israel, everything. And he had an agreement with Israel on weapons salesmen. So there may be, I'm not sure there is, but I think it's worthwhile checking.
Thank you. Someone from the audience would like to hear your opinion And I'll quote the question: if no agreement, how do we protect the future of Israel?
Agreement with Iran, with the Palestinians, with whom? Well, the future of Israel is not subject to an agreement. If we say this, it means you give them a veto power on Israel. No, we will survive with or without an agreement. Much better to have an agreement. Important to even give in some things to get an agreement, to compromise for an agreement from position of strength. It's not dependent on having an agreement, but we need to have an agreement. We had agreements in the past. It didn't work very well. So I don't think agreement is a prerequisite for Israel's existence. It's for a much better future that we need an agreement. But as every agreement needs two parties to sign it, so the Middle East agreement, if there is no Palestinian leadership who is ready to give up the one thing for which the PLO was established, what they call the right of return. Not only do they have a state, they want to have a right to send people back to live with us, which will of course destroy the whole story. As long as they don't give up on this, there won't be an agreement. If they give up on this, I think the majority of Israelis will go for an agreement. As long as we don't have one, what I offered earlier is, do we change the course on which we are towards an agreement? I think that we should do that even if there's no agreement, without taking the army out, unless there's agreement, of course.
Well, I certainly think that the future is not at all in question here. Both Dan and myself referred to the historic viewpoint. I remember myself as a young officer in the military fighting the Egyptians on the other side. And the fact is that so much has changed in this part of the world. We have peace with Egypt, we have peace with Jordan, we have peace with the Emirates, with Bahrain, and with others. The future of Israel is only going to be determined by the Israelis, but this is not the topic of our discussion today, the inner circle I was referring to. But I don't think that the future is in danger. It's the quality of the life we live here in this part of the world, because we are here to stay and everybody else is also here to stay.
In regard to that issue, 20% of Israeli citizens are Palestinians, are Arabs. How do you perceive their role in this whole process of the new relationship with the Emirates, the peace with Egypt, with Jordan, with the Palestinians? Where are they in that big picture?
Yossi, will you start or?
No, you go first.
Okay. It's a major challenge for us, first of all. You see, Jews have been minorities all over the world since the exile, since 2,000 years ago. In every country, including in the United States of America, Jews used to be the champions of human rights and minority rights. And you know, it's for the blacks, for others, Jews were there in the human rights movements, drafting the human rights conventions. It was a very Jewish cause, and I am very proud of it. Now we are a majority for the first time after 2,000 years. 80% of Jews, 20% of Arabs. How do we treat the Arabs amongst us? I don't speak of security things that need to be taken care of. Do we treat them equally with even affirmative action for the minorities? Or do we say, it's not for you, it's only for us, say thank you that you live here? The basic concept was that they should be totally equal with us. And I would say basically they are. They vote in the Knesset as I vote in the Knesset. They have the same rights. The Supreme Court judges are Arab and ministers been an Arab and members of Knesset. But there is a mood recently or a bad wind recently that goes back to nationalistic themes. It's only for the Jews. It's a Jewish state, not for the Arabs. Yes, it's a Jewish state, but it doesn't mean that Jews don't need to treat the minorities rightly. And it's a major challenge for us. I think we can do it better, and I hope we'll be able to fight back against those trends of not giving full equality to the Arab citizenship here. Can they be of help? Can they be the bridge to the Arab world? I'm afraid I doubt. I know that's the story people tell. In the end, it's forgive me for the elitist view. It's a leadership question. if the leader of Israel and the leader of an Arab country takes Sadat and Begin for the best example, make a decision against, by the way, the polls and what the people want, then you have a major change in history. Had Begin gone to the people in the poll or in the election, they would have told him, don't give up everything, are you crazy? Part of the Labour Party said, don't give up everything. Dayan used to say, better Sharm el-Sheikh than peace. But there was a leader who said, I don't go to the pollsters, I say what is right and I do it. Sadat, the same thing. The Egyptians wouldn't have done it, leaders did it. It's not the people, the Arabs or Jews, it's leadership on both sides. Unfortunately, there is no leadership on the Palestinian side who was ready to say anything positive to Olmert, to Barak, to Peres, to Rabin, not to speak of Sharon, not to speak of Netanyahu. So there's a leadership problem. The Arabs of Israel can't help much. But there is a way in which they can be of help in facilitating in commerce, in talks, and some of them do that. And I think they should be encouraged to do that. But they are Israelis. They are Israelis. They are not anything else. Yes, as I'm a Jew and he's an Arab, but we are all Israelis. I'll give you a story. Years ago, Abu Mazen wanted to see me at home. And he sent Dr. Ahmed Tibi, a member of the Knesset for the Arab parties. And he said to me, I just resigned from Ministry of Finance, it was 98 or 99. Abu Mazen wants to see you. I said, welcome. And I headed home and Tibi says, I'm coming with him. I said, no, Ahmed. You can come to me alone. If you come from the Israeli side. You don't come from his side. You are an Israeli and not on the Palestinian side. So the Israelis should not be put in a position that they are part of them. Not they are part of us. They are part of the state of Israel. They vote here. They are part of us as a minority, full rights, not part of them. Let's not make this mistake.
Well, I think I'm in full agreement with Dan. The Arabs of Israel are full-fledged citizens of this country. The only difference between the Arabs and the Jews here is that service in the military is not compulsory, and for a good reason. You certainly don't want them to meet their family members, God forbid, if there is a clash. Can they serve as a bridge? I mean, here again, I think that if we have learned something from past experiences, it is the greatness of Sadat and Begin, of King Hussein and Rabin, referring to the question of leadership. I have to say, however, that I regret the fact that so very few Israelis speak the language. I mean, all of the Arabs of Israel, I mean, the vast majority of them are fluent in Hebrew, which is naturally what happens with minorities. But I would really want to see that all of our children speak Arabic. It is not only a question of the ability to communicate directly with the other side, but it is, again, for me, it is another expression of their full rights as full citizens in this country.
Thank you. Norman asks...
By the way, Dan speaks Arabic and I speak Arabic.
Not very good one. I should improve it, but I can, in the streets of Jerusalem, I learned it and I do speak in the streets. I'm not as good as I should have been, but okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not. There is a very, very interesting question that has been phrased very cautiously. I would probably phrase it much more radically, but I'll read it the way it was phrased by Norman. Who are our true friends among the European countries? And how do we reconcile having good relationship with right-wing governments who have some components who may be anti-Semitic?
Well, you know, Dan, with your...
The ambassador.
Yeah, with Dan.
So you go first, and I'll try to add something later.
You know what's the best definition of a diplomat? The best definition of a diplomat is the one I learned in France. Un diplomate est une personne qui réfléchit à 2 fois avant de ne rien dire. A diplomat is a person who thinks twice before saying nothing. But in this case, I will say something. Having served both in France and in the Netherlands, I think that we have to really look at some of the basic facts and look at the importance of Europe to this country. It is not only the fact that our history was written for better or for worse, was written on European soil. It is not only the fact that Europe is our backyard or we are the backyard of Europe, the fact that Nicosia is only 32 minutes by flight. It's not only the fact that culturally we come from the same world, that 38% of our exports go to Europe. All of this together suggests to me that we should be a little bit more relaxed about our relationship with Europe. And of course, I mean, differences of opinion can be tolerated, but the differences of opinion every now and then are only part of the story. And I suggest that we should look at the wider story and the importance of this relationship to Israel. And I'm talking about the European Union as a whole, even though, yes, I mean, in the countries I serve, we encountered more than once differences of opinion, but differences of opinion are natural to relationship between human beings and certainly between countries.
Well, I of course agree with what Yossi said. Let me add some words on this. Europe and Israel is a unique story. In fact, until the 19th century, 90% of the Jews lived in Europe, 10% in the Arab countries around the Middle East. Then Europe started, the earth started to be very unwelcoming to the Jews. Pogrom in Russia, the Dreyfus affair in France, and Jews felt that Europe, that was their home for practically 2 millennia, is not accepting them anymore. And people tried to fly away. Many of you in Los Angeles have the grandparents or parents coming in the wake of the 19th century, beginning 20th century, running away from Europe where they lived. And others went to South Africa, to England. The Zionist idea was to build a state for our own because Europe couldn't take us anymore. Jews felt it, that it's going to be disastrous. The Zionist movement was built in Europe, on European soil, with a spring of nations in Europe, the national idea in Europe, it's all from there. Theodor Herzl, Jabotinsky, Ben Gurion, Weizmann, it's all Europe. Our culture, what is our culture? What are we learn Shakespeare and Molière, even here in Israel. It's not, we don't learn things of the Philippines or China. This is our culture. This is where we come from. These are the values. And nowadays, Europe is part of what we call the free world. The free world, America leading, or used to be leading it, I think still, hopefully is still leading it, hopefully after November 3rd once again. We are part of that world that is under attack from totalitarian regimes and extreme chauvinism and so forth. We belong to that world. So Israel and Europe have a lot in common on top of commerce and diplomatic relationship. And it's not foreign to me when I go there. I know it from stories, from history, from my family. It's part of us in many ways. So Europe is important to Israel and Israel is important to Europe. There is anti-Semitism in Europe. I just mentioned all the way down to the massacre of 6 million Jews. It didn't start from nothing. From the Catholic Church, Europe has been the best and the worst for us in many years. And it does not go away. Look at what happens now. The rise of the extreme right wing. See France with Marine Le Pen, anti-Semitic, fascist, racist. Look at others in Freiheitspartei in Deutschland, in Germany, and Mr. Wilders in Holland that you were in. You hear in Austria, the Freiheitspartei in Austria, sorry, in Alternative für Deutschland in Germany. You have anti-Semitism there. I can't overlook it. For me, anti-Semitism has a solution. It's the state of Israel. We live here. We don't have it. We need to fight it. But don't forget the importance of Europe in many ways. As I said, the values and so forth. This is part of what we should find a way to bridge gaps. Now, on top of it, there is one issue on which we have problems in Europe, is the Palestinian story. The Europe is with us on Iran, Europe is with us on the Syrian story, Europe is with us in admiring our technology, a startup nation. On the Palestinian issue is a difference of opinion. So don't make all of Europe anti-Israeli. On this issue, there's no agreement with many countries. The last thing, again, I think that with Europe, Israel can work did work better and can work better to have good relationship. What you mentioned, Norman, is one of the most troubling things that I can think of. When I hear of leaders who are pro-Israel and anti-Semites, it makes me ask myself questions. How do we come to that? Like Mr. Orban in Hungary, when he fights the human rights organizations and companies who help, associations that help human rights, he passes laws that calls them anti-Soros laws, because Soros is a Jew. So you see anti-Semitic words and sentences, and he's a friend of Israel. It's strange. I know politics is politics, and you have a friend, don't send him away. But we should remember that we are the Jewish state, and Jewish history and some basic morality should guide us. And we should make it clear that, yes, we are together on many things. We have been in good relationship with Russia of Stalin. I'm not saying we should be only with the good guys. There are none in the world. But when you get to the extreme edges of racist, anti-Semitic behavior and words, one should be cautious and make a point. Don't overlook it and don't let it go unnoticed.
And just one thing I would add is that let us not generalize. I mean, look at what happened in Greece only a few weeks ago when the party, the Chrysiavki, the neo-fascist party, was really thrown out of government. So we should not generalize. Of course, there are problems. We don't want to ignore them. And I always remind myself that I started my years in Paris as an ambassador at the time of the massacre of the school children in Toulouse. And the end of my tour of duty was around the Jewish supermarché, the supermarket, and Charlie Hebdo. So yes, it is there, but we should really try to analyze the situation as it is and not jump into general conclusions.
Speaking of general conclusions, we're approaching our time. And before we depart and thank everybody for joining us, I was wondering if you are willing to share with us a short story, personal story, that will sort of, give us some hope during those trying times, times of COVID-19, times of many challenges. So if you have a personal moment that you want to share with us, that would be great. And if you want to keep your personal moments to yourself, that's okay too. Yossi, shall we start with you?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I mentioned the fact that, I was a young military officer in the Sinai during that terrible war of attrition. I was wounded. I lost so many of my friends there in the Sinai. And for me, later, when I was asked to join my colleagues at the peace negotiations in Washington with the Jordanians and with the Palestinians, the very fact that I was able to communicate directly with these people was really the experience of my life, and the experience that made me believe that everything is possible in this crazy part of the world.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, I would add something to Yossi's memories of the war and say something on a different topic, which is again personal. Yossi is a young guy, so he didn't take part. I think in the 6 Days War, he was too young for that. But I was already a tank commander in the Sinai, fighting all the way from near the Gaza Strip all the way to the channel, to the canal. And this was a victorious war where I lost friends and so forth. And I remember that after the war, I, like many others, had this crazy idea, and I think I'm not a stupid guy, that nothing can happen to us anymore. We are that strong. And I then, in the Yom Kippur of 73, just before 2 o'clock when the siren went on, I got a phone call from my unit, come up quickly to the north, to the tanks unit where I am. And I took my car and a friend who was the same unit and went to the north. And after 2 days, by the way, I was taken to a hospital in Sfat because they hit me, I'm fine. But so I saw the victory justified and wonderful. And the hubris after this, and I saw the collapse of it. I remember that day very well. I remember what I don't want to go into details, a very dramatic story, how I found out. I remember, by the way, when I go up to the Golan Heights with my tanks, on the net, I hear the voice of Raful, who was then the head of the division. Hold tight, hold that, tachziku ma'amad. Don't withdraw. The IDF is withdrawing, who thought of it? I saw the difference in a minute, what happens here. So I saw how important it is to be strong and how stupid it is to think that strength is all. Without strength, you're dead. But force on its own won't do everything. You need to be smarter than that. The other thing I want to tell you, we didn't touch here. You know, I dealt with many things in my public career, the diplomatic things and the legal things and economic and everything you might have heard of. One of the most moving processes I took part in was when the Soviet Union was about to collapse, and Jews started to come in big numbers from the Soviet Union or from Russia along the years to Israel. To me, it was really a dream come true. We always said, let my people go. We tried, we heard, but who believed, in fact, it's going to happen? I remember I used to go, I was then Minister of Justice, but I dealt with it a lot. I used to go anonymously to the airport and just look at the planes coming down, unloading thousands of people, day in, day out, from Moscow, from Odessa, from St. Petersburg, from all over Russia, an exodus really. And if you looked for a raison d'etre, French term, for the Jewish state, I saw it there. For the same places, 40 years earlier, Jews wanted to run away, there was no place to go to. Everything was blocked, including the United States. And Jews were left there to die. And all of a sudden, 1 million people in several years coming to our country and absorbed in our country so successfully. So if we need a reason of being why what we are doing is such a great endeavor, great historic endeavor, these years, these moments were one of the greatest, most moving parts that I took part in my life.
Thank you very much, Yossi and Dan and Yossi. And I'd like to introduce Sherry Kaufer, the Executive Director of American Friends of Hebrew University, the Western region, for some concluding remarks. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you very much. Sherry, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning to our LA people and our supporters, and good evening, and thank you so much to Dan, Vered, and Yossi for sharing your insights with us this morning. I also want to thank Mark and Patty for helping to facilitate the program and for being such incredibly wonderful, passionate, dedicated supporters. And thank you to all of you who participated in this enlightening and informative program. For those of you that would like to know more about AFHU, please visit our website at www.afhu.org. Thank you so much for attending and have a wonderful day.